All right, we are back on our second day of working with vectors, right? And so this is what we've covered so far. We learned how to make our thumbnail sketches for proving ground number 2. And last class, we chose that best proving ground and we turned it into a refined sketch. So this is proving ground number 2. Because they are different, I'm actually going to make a new folder in my master folder. So I haven't done that yet. That I call proving ground number 2. And I have now completed it. And from that, I am going to move these labeled thumbnail sketches and now they're in my proving ground folder, right? That's the only artwork for proving ground number 2. The other requirement for proving ground number 2 was that you comment on another student's sketches, tell them a clear preference you have for one of their designs and a reason why you like that one. So I'm going to pretend that a fellow student commented on mine and said, I really like your dynamic one. It looks spiffy. I think it looks spiffy because, why would they say? Because it reminds me of a tattoo design. Okay, so, and then I think to myself, which one do I like best? And yeah, I like that one the best too. That's the one I'm going to do. So now I'm ready to start assignment 4. And what I do is I take that sketch and I turn it into this, into a refined version of that sketch. Now, what is the difference between this and this? The most important difference that your refined sketch should have, which is the first requirement for assignment 4, is that it is shape-based, that it is filled in with black shapes. But there are additional refinements I made. So yes, I filled it in with black shapes, but then I also slightly corrected the curve of the tail. And I replaced one of the wings by duplicating that wing. And I cut into the mouth slightly differently. Just little tweaks, right? The whole point of a refined sketch for vector design is you know exactly where you want your black shapes to be and where you want your empty space to be. Because the difficulty of vectors is not in making a drawing that you like. The difficulty of vectors is making what you want as clean as possible. That's what vectors do. Right now, this is a refined sketch. It is not very clean, but it's very clear and confident about where it wants its clean shapes to be. That's why it's not high resolution. It doesn't really matter. All of this is going to get replaced with perfectly clean vectors. So how do I do that? How do I set it up? I go to our new freeware program, which is vectr.com. And I am going to use an account. So I have signed in under Karl Frey 1 at alamo.edu, right? What I want you to do is either be signed in with someone's account. As long as you're signed in with some account, that means when you use Vectr.com on these computers, it will remember your progress. The smartest thing is to sign out whoever is signed in, and then to sign in, create your own account with an email that you use. All it asks for is an email and a password, right? But that way, anywhere you use a browser and use Vectr.com, it will remember your progress. And you can save more than just this project. You can keep using that with that login as long as their free use agreement stays the same. Right? So, then you get to this page. Freeware, like Photopea, we are not paying anything, so we've made no binding contract with them. They can change their services at any time, and they are now trying to get you to pay for AI features, right? because AI features are really hot right now, generative AI. We don't want any of that. What we want is my designs, right? My designs are going to show the vectors that I'm creating. There's no AI involved in these at all. And if I want to create a brand new one, which I'll do, I'm going to say new artwork. So if you haven't created any designs, say new artwork, you'll get to here. Here is where you put the name in for your project. And I want you to name your files with your name and then a description. And then I want you to put these dimensions. They're just a little bit bigger than the default. 800 by 800 pixels. And then create. What that 800 by 800 pixels is a pixel grid. That's what's called an artboard. Vectors do not use pixels. But if you were to print your vector, it would need to map it to a certain measurement. So it uses pixels to do that. So that's all this is. 800 by 800 gives us a good screen size resolution on which to design our vector. Now I've created that 800 by 800. Now I can drag and drop my refined sketch in. This is the same refined sketch that you posted for assignment 4 as your first requirement. So if you haven't posted it yet, or if you haven't finished your refined sketch yet, go to the very end of Unit 9, where we are posting assignment 4, and the first thing you post is that refined sketch. That's the same file you're going to drag and drop into vectr.com. So it needs to be either a JPEG or a PNG, an online file like one that would work on Canvas. It should not be a PSD. Then I can size it. Just make it fit kind of nicely on the artboard. So that means if your sketch was really tiny like mine, this is going to soften it a little bit, make it a little bit higher resolution so you can see your curves. Next, I'm going to take the opacity on this right-hand column and take it down to about 20%. The reason I can take it down so far, all the way to 20 instead of the 50 that we usually onion skin a sketch at, is because we clean these up to be black and white, right? So it's really clear. Now, I want to find that image. And to do that, I click on Layers on the left-hand side, little layer icon, and I can see this. This actually isn't a path. This is an image. But I'm going to lock it with the padlock. And just like layers in Photopea, you can turn it on and off. All right, next. Remember in Photopea, which I have open here. What? It was working. Doesn't matter. Okay. Remember in Photopea how we used shapes and the vector shape tools to create our emojis for our second exercise, right? We could do that here as well. So for instance, to make this, there's no easy shape to make this body. But for the eye, I could find an eye shape, under the shape tools. That's what this is. And then I could put it in. Boom. Problem is, it's very clip arty. Once it comes in, I can rotate it. Just like you can transform in Photopea. I can, stretch it. But because it's a vector, it's going to show me the properties on the side. And the only properties this has, because this is what's called a compound vector, is opacity. This is not what we're using. We are not using two color vectors. We are not using compound vectors. We are just creating black vector shapes. So all of these complex shapes you can't use for this, but the simple shapes you can. Because those, look at all the properties you get for them. This is what you need. You need to be able to change the color. We're going to change it to black. This is a fill. And you want to be able to change the border, which is also known as the stroke, and just make sure it's turned off. That's an outline. And now I can use this, and just like in Photopea and using vector shape tools, I can rotate it, I can scale it, but maybe it's not quite the right shape. So we are not limited to only using shape tools. Instead, if I see it on the layers, you can see that, right? Instead, we are going to be creating our own vector shapes. And to do that, the tool is the pen tool. The shortcut for it is to hit V if you're on another tool. So what I tend to do is I work between the layers and the pen tool when I'm using Vectr.com. Now, I'm going to draw this eye in multiple ways. Okay? I'm going to show you all the techniques that you can use to help learn the pen tool. The first is what's called polygonal design. And it's pretty basic. You click, you move, 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 and you end where you started. Very important to end where you start so that it is a closed path. Now, why is it polygonal design? Because like a polygon, right, no matter how many corners it has, it's always straight lines between those points. And then I can change the color of it, can fill it with black, and I can turn off the outline. So that's one way I can design the eye. Then, how do I change those straights into curves? Well, if I double click it, I'll see the anchor points. And this is where you can modify your vector. And on each anchor point, there's a little circle target that is the rounding tool. And I can use that to round out certain anchor points. And sometimes this can give me the shape I want. Like if I want an almond-shaped eye, this is a pretty good way to get it. Right? And then I can double click. And this kind of looks like a weird kind of lemon right now. Okay, so how did I do that? Well, I did it as a polygon and then I rounded it all. Now if I double click it, you'll see it's a little weird. The anchor points actually aren't on the path. The anchor points are floating out here with these rounding things. Now, this is a tricky way to do it, because if I wanted to modify it, it doesn't seem clear how everything's related. But that rounding tool is there as kind of a helpful shortcut. What's another way I could do it? I'm going to click that path I just made. And I'm going to turn it off, right? And I'm going to show you another way. So first I did it as a shape, then I did it as polygonal design, that I then used the rounding tool for. I can do Command Z to go backwards before I did all that, right? But it started this way. And then I turned off the border on it. Okay. Next, I'm going to use the pen tool, but I'm going to use it in the way that it's really intended to be used, where you plot curves sometimes and you plot straights other times. But how do you control that? So this is obviously mostly curves, but that does not mean that I only ever do curves. So let me explain. I start somewhere, then I move. But now, because I don't want a straight between these 2 points, instead I want a curve, a simple curve. I click and I drag. And when I drag, these 2 handles come out of my anchor point. Those are called Bezier handles. Now, as I start to plot my next point, it's going to give me what's called a sympathetic curve, a curve that follows the curve I just made. This is to try to help me if I want to round out this eye. But maybe I don't want that sympathetic curve. In this case, it's pretty helpful. What you're going to do is hold down Command, click on this handle, the one that's called the leading handle, and then push it all the way back to your anchor point. And now you've set that curve, and now you have another straight you can set. And I'm going to set this as a straight that then I drag into a new curve. And that lets me completely control that curve. Does that make sense? Sure, it does. Okay. So now I'm going to click back here.